Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Big Jiu-Jitsu Show. I'm Rob the Lord Humongous, and don't forget we're a member of the Pod Bros Podcast Network. Go to podbros.com. Find yourself another podcast you might be interested in. I mean, there's all sorts. Just go listen to them. And don't forget to go to bigjujitsu.com. We've just redone the website, so it looks super professional now. Go look at it. I'm pretty proud of it because it took me a grand total of probably 7 hours to build it, but check it out. The store is incorporated now, so it's kind of easy to find, and all of our podcast links will be up there soon enough. So today, I got a special guest with me today. I've got a man that I've been talking to on Facebook in a friendly way, for about jiu-jitsu, Mr. James Coleman. How's it going, man?
Going well, thank you.
Good. Well, I'm glad to have you on the show. Why don't you give us a little background about how you got started in martial arts and where you've been and where you're at now?
Sure. Well, it's been a long journey for me. Back in the early '80s, I think with movies, if there was a ninjutsu school close by, I would have certainly jumped on that. But due to the lack of availability, I got into karate in the early '80s, and I've been on the mats ever since then for 30 years. And I trained in an Okinawan karate style when I was a kid, and then from there I moved into to various styles, and then I started training in a very simple form of jiu-jitsu when I was pretty young, and then when I was 18, I sort of left all of the other martial arts styles and just focused on jiu-jitsu, and I've trained in jiu-jitsu and judo, two types of jiu-jitsu and judo since about 1997, 1998.
Nice. And so where are you at right now? Like, where are you training? Where are you teaching?
Right now, at this exact moment, I am in our Fredericksburg dojo in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And I also have a gym. We train in Crystal City, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. We started in Washington, D.C. about 10 or 12 years ago, right in Northwest D.C. And we've since, moved to get bigger and bigger spaces. And now we're in Crystal City and we're in Fredericksburg.
So you got two locations you're running pretty much right now, two different places. So are you like just kind of spread out between the two of them?
I teach at the Crystal City location. I teach there 1 day a week, and we have another black belt that handles most of the class load there. And then I teach at the Fredericksburg school 5 days a week.
Wow. So it's pretty full training time for you then, right?
Yeah, I have 1 day off.
I know the feeling. Well, we had to move back classes. Something that was nice was we moved the Saturday morning class I teach back to Friday nights because Friday nights were done. So now I have like a full weekend. My wife's real excited about that. So you have some other projects going on right now, I believe, right? Like, is there anything in the works that you've got going on for jiu-jitsu?
There's quite a few things actually. I'm working on an illustrated book. That's been going on for about a year and a half now, and the scope of it just keeps getting greater and greater. So I'm almost done. It's about 100 different illustrations of techniques, and so that's almost done. I'm close to being done with that, and I've also been working on a short film, which is very, the martial arts, like the choreography in it, is very jiu-jitsu based. So I've been working on a short film for some time now, and we have our final shoot for that. I think we wrap in June. So hopefully I'll have that out soon as well.
Really? I had no idea about the film. Like, can you give us any insight into it? That's pretty damn cool. Like, tell me
Yeah.
about it.
Okay, sure. So it's loosely based on Goethe's Faust and the Don Giovanni opera. It has a lot of like chess analogies to it. So the story is basically, it has it's sort of an homage to the 70s Yakuza style of cinema. And the cinematography in it is what I would consider sort of a street style of jiu-jitsu. I think what's sort of becoming popular now with like the John Wick and like some of these types of films where you're seeing a lot of like, jiu-jitsu as opposed to a kung fu wire style of choreography.
Yeah, I know that was really popular back in like The Matrix, like Flying Wire, stuff like that. And then finally when John Wick came out, my buddy was like, we gotta go see this movie. Keanu's been doing jiu-jitsu for it and judo. I was like, oh shit, let's go see that. So it's changed a lot. And do you think it's more based on the fact that UFC and MMA has become more popular, or do you feel that it's just kind of like let's try something new? Because I remember I think the first time they really did jujitsu choreography was it Lethal Weapon when Mel Gibson choked out Gary Busey with a triangle choke.
Yeah, a terrible triangle choke in the front, but epic nonetheless. Um, I think there is a somewhat of a paradigm shift as far as choreography goes. I think that, like I referenced earlier, like sort of in the early 80s, like you had this ninjutsu and kung fu, and there was a mysticism to it. You know, it was still very exotic to us. And like when Bushido, The Art of Killing came out in the 70s, you know, that was like, you know, and then Bruce Lee followed. And I think there was still like this sort of there was an exoticism to it. It wasn't well known. But now with the internet and with martial arts and real martial arts have become so popular, I think that there's a different demand as far as what the viewer wants to see. You know, Crouching Tiger is a beautiful movie, but no one considers that a realistic fighting style, I think, that we see in that.
Well, I would like to think that maybe if I trained really hard, I could deflect all those needles with a Tai Chi sword, but probably not. But like you said, something more practical. And I know, like movies now, like you said, are moving towards that pragmatic, practical martial arts like jiu-jitsu, the Muay Thai. But there's still a part of me that like likes the Ong Bak type movies where the
Yeah.
guy can like do double backflips, like him fighting the capoeira guy. And I'm trying to remember which one it was. That that still like really entertains me. That still kind of like
Oh, yeah, dude.
blows my mind.
I love like the Bruce Lee movies, like The Raid, and even some of these more modern movies with these like over the top choreographies. You know, they still are very entertaining to me. But I think that those older films and even the Crouching Tiger genre, it's referencing like a mysticism that was associated with martial arts early on. And that mysticism was because people hadn't seen it before. So when you see this like sleight of hands, it does seem very much like trickery or witchcraft or supernatural. Whereas now we're looking through it such a more not jaded, but we have a very realistic filter on our approach to martial arts, and we see it as something that can be tested. You know, the UFC definitely, you know, aided in that.
Yeah, I know that was something that if you watch some of these other videos, like the Sistema videos from this one guy, the very large Russian guy who points his bow staff at people and they somehow lose their mind and fall over or things like that. I see a lot of comments that are like, well, if only there was a place where people with different martial arts could test it out and see where it was effective. And someone's like, oh no shit, it's the UFC. Like how is it these people still, I guess, fall for not really fall for it, but kind of are rooted in this type of like the Sistema guy or the no touch knockout guy or the guy who can barely put his hands on you and you fall asleep somehow. How is that still a
Well,
thing?
I think that for the same like the same design, the same way that you and I are so drawn to jujitsu or whatever martial art, like every system and every sort of organization has a cult of personality, and they are going to attract like minds who are looking or see a reflection of themselves or they see a need fulfilled in this. So, you know, it's like this sort of like the tent revival power of persuasion. I think that's what's happening. You know, people want to believe so bad, you know, and this appeals to them. You know, if I wanted to do a martial art that I didn't have to be physically fit, I didn't ever have to test it, you know, it was all theoretical with no empirical practice, then I would be attracted to these styles. You know, I would be attracted to like the Chi masters and the Aikido masters and things like that. But I think that, you know, I'm not, and clearly you're not. So I guess that's how they, you know, if there wasn't a demand, there'd be no need for a supply. So I
Well,
guess it's cyclical.
I mean, I'm really lazy, so the appeal of it is is like really, I don't have to do anything, but I can just put my hand out, and whoever's attacking me is going to fall over. Like that's easy. Why do I have to run or do push-ups or stretch or even sweat a little bit? I guess to learn how to defend myself when I can just focus all of my chi and put it into somebody, and then they lock up and fall over. Like
Yeah,
I guess I can see that.
I've actually been to demonstrations and I've seen some of these like these chi demonstrations and um, I I haven't. I guess I'm sort of a skeptical guy. I've never seen anything to make me believe that it was real.
There has to be some sort of like overwhelming evidence, like we're talking about. There's still some skepticism too. Like you said, we need that pragmatic type of martial art, but somehow these guys, it's too deadly for UFC, or this only works because you might kill somebody. But somehow these guys still are drawing all these people. So I feel bad for them. Like I do feel bad for them because it
I
is.
think. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, no. You go ahead. You're the
Well,
guest here. You get to talk too.
I think it's that same illusion, that same false sense of security that permeates like a lot of the karate schools and the taekwondo schools. It's the same illusion that people are buying into, and they want to buy into it because you want to believe that your 12-year-old is an amazing black belt. You want to believe it. If you didn't want to believe it, then you would clearly call bullcrap on it immediately and be like this.
Right.
So people want to believe.
Kind of like the Fox Mulder, I want to believe type.
I wanted to believe that this new season was going to be amazing. I really did. I was definitely let down.
I didn't finish it. I was kind of just hung out after the third No, wait, what was it? It was the first or second episode where he starts going real crazy with the conspiracy theories. I'm like, I don't know. This isn't like the Monster of the Week type season that I'm used to, or even like the cigarette. Well, the cigarette smoking man was on one of them. Spoiler alert. I'm very sorry, but he was on one of the episodes. So
Yeah.
to me, it was kind of, like, where's my Dracula? Where's my weird alien bounty hunter that's killing people?
I thought it started out pretty strong. I was definitely, I don't know, maybe, who knows, maybe I wanted to believe, maybe the nostalgia was overwhelming to me, and I was like looking past the bad acting and looking past all of these things because it seemed, it fulfilled something I wanted so bad.
Yeah, you go back to that time where it was something that was really entertaining to you. I think what happened to me too was that Californication ruined David Duchovny for me. Like I couldn't take him serious as Fox Mulder anymore.
Yeah, I never got into that. I loved him in California, that with Brad Pitt and Juliette Lewis.
Yeah, so now he's no longer Agent Fox Mulder, the only guy I've seen him in the show, like, being. He was the burnout writer, just going around sticking his junk in whatever woman he could get his hands on at the time. So
Yeah, yeah, I haven't seen that show. Maybe I need to check it out.
it's entertaining. It's kind of the same problem. I didn't really make it through the first season, but for what it was pretty entertaining. So speaking of TV shows and stuff, what drew you to making this film that incorporated a lot of your jujitsu and martial arts?
Well, I've been making short films for quite a while now. I'm an art major, and I definitely went through that period of the weird art movies and like the long pauses and the harmony Korine, and I definitely had that phase. And I'm constantly like videoing techniques. I put up techniques for our students like weekly, and one of my longtime collaborators. We've been talking for a while. I did a short, like a bare knuckle boxing type of film a couple years back. It's really short, and then we were like, well, like we've all sort of progressed in our craft. Let's step it up a notch, and have a full crew, and really do what we can do with very limited budget, with the hopes of perhaps kickstarting a larger project. So we've basically filmed what I would consider like 3 acts, like in a play or an opera. And I'm hoping that if people are interested in it, then we will continue to film more acts to it and sort of let the plot like sort of unveil itself.
So where would people find this then? Since you said you're wrapping it up, is there a site that's already kind of made, or is there anywhere we could follow it, or is it just going to be like, boom, here's the movie, watch it?
We're playing it pretty close to the chest right now.
Ooh, nice.
So, and as soon as it comes out in June, I will put it all over social media. I'll make sure I get it to you. And I'm hoping that I think the jiu-jitsu community and the martial arts community will embrace it. I mean, basically anything with, a decent camera seems to like just skyrocket, like with, the Stuart Cooper films and things like that. So I'm hoping that if we add like an artistic narrative to this, along with like, something that's very visually stimulating, and that when martial arts practitioners will be like, oh, well, that's this move, or that's kataguruma, or that's this, then I think that my hope is that it has an appeal.
I'm sure it will. Like you said, everybody's really getting into these films where it shows the arts we love. So tell me you couldn't take a group of jujitsu guys, go to John Wick, because I know we did it, and you're like, oh, you did a devil hit a sweep from here. Like, oh,
Yeah.
everybody. And, instead he's like shooting people in the face, and everybody else is like, oh, man, he shot him in the face. That's crazy. And we're like, did you see that? He swept him from that position. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean the plot was certainly nothing new, but it has such a cult following. I know all of our guys, they all loved it.
Oh, good to hear. Very good to hear. So I know that kind of martial arts movies are like it's a weird like ebb and flow type thing. It's kind of parabolic on how they're popular, not so popular, popular, not so popular. I know there was a movie that came out not too long ago, and I felt kind of like it's like the kung fu version of Never Back Down. I think it was called shit. What was it called? It was called The Martial Arts Kid. I was kind of like, let's check it out. But it was Don the Dragon Wilson and Cynthia Rothrock.
Nice.
I was like, holy shit. I want to sound bad, but I was like, well, they're still alive? Holy hell.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But I think it could have been done a little better, honestly. Like you said, like there's that. They didn't like embrace the mysticism of like the old school martial arts, but they didn't really exactly embrace the pragmatic martial arts like depiction now.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of in between. So it didn't really sell one way or the other. So I was that's why it was wishy washy to me.
Well, I think that like I recently I think Fighter in the Wind sort of captured that balance that you're talking about. And the story is of what's his name? Oyama, I think. Oyama was the guy that would like chop the horns off of bulls. I think it's about Oyama who formed Kyokushin karate, and that was a pretty epic movie that had that sort of combination and had a good juxtaposition of the practical and the mysticism. And yeah, I thought Red Belt sort of paid a similar tribute to jujitsu, but also like this sort of like we said like this cult of personality, the tribe within a tribe, sort of these things that are I guess somewhat associated with the counterculture of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it was David Mamet who did that, correct?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I talked about that. Like a year ago on the podcast. We had Tiffany Baylo. We both love David Mamet movies, so that was a good like move into it. So, what made you not just start filming things, but what made you get into art? Was it just something you've always wanted to do, or did you just kind of fall into it?
Well, I was always into drawing and doodling. I guess as a kid, my main influence were probably skateboard decks and heavy metal album covers. That was like I was super into that. And then I'm 36, so I grew up in a time where there were still like a lot of airbrush vans hanging around from the 70s, and I always loved that sort of. I loved that, and I loved like the sort of the Chicano lowrider stuff, and so I had a very low brow, like as my influences early on, and then later I became more influenced by like classical art and you know fine art.
So we're talking like Ronnie James Dio, barbarian with the axe on the album cover of his, or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, I love that stuff, and all the Iron Maiden album covers, especially.
Absolutely, those those actually are like really cool thing. And you're not too much older than me. I'm 31, about to be 32. So like the skateboard decks, like you said, that was a huge thing too. Like all of it was really cool to me as well. Just how like I don't know, I haven't been keeping up with skateboarding, so it's kind of my fault. But I guess like maybe the 90s, early 2000s, like there was a ton of companies and they had all these awesome different, designs or runs that they had.
Yeah, I was really into that. I was really into that scene, and I think that it's a counterculture very similar to jujitsu now. Like skateboarding within like the sort of extreme sports is very similar to jujitsu within the martial arts world. It's to quote Point Break, it's like a group within a group, a tribe within a tribe.
It is, and I do find that interesting because it also seems to be that, no matter what, like if you go out skateboarding and you run into other people who skateboard, there's not like who the hell are these guys? Like, what's their deal? It's like, oh, dude, you skateboard. Me too. You're going to go ride? It's kind of the same thing with jujitsu.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
I can count on maybe one hand the amount of times that people were negative towards it but every other time you like just talk about jujitsu. Like
Yeah.
there's just like this brotherhood that comes from it.
Absolutely, man, and it's such the community has, and now the outreach of the community is so great, and guys like yourself, like podcasts like you, and like there's a ton of jujitsu podcasts right now, and I think that's definitely like sort of expanded the reach in this like sort of community. The only time, anytime I hear someone talk about jujitsu, like kind of like well, and it's a common ground, something to speak on. The only time I see a division in the community is at like a competition is really the only time I ever see
Yeah,
division or separation.
I was gonna say, but even then, like at the end of the day, we all do jujitsu, so I've never had like a fuck that guy moment from a tournament. I'm like, dude, you beat me. Okay, cool. Like, what you
Yeah,
like? Thanks, appreciate it. That was really
yeah,
cool what you did.
yeah. No, I have no animosity towards anyone. I guess we've felt it quite a bit in our club because we're a non-Gracie Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu academy, and we have been. I've been a part of a non-Gracie Jiu-Jitsu organization for over a decade now, so we've always had a little bit of pushback from the bigger Jiu-Jitsu community. Um, just I don't know if it's a well, it's strange. I'm not quite sure how to comment on it.
I was gonna say, do you think it's mainly something I've noticed or something I've kind of thought about as well? Is that the Gracies brought the UFC to the United States, and they kind of showed off Hoist, who's not their biggest or best fighter, and he came in, he cleaned up all these people. So the Gracie name became synonymous with jiu-jitsu. That's why a lot of people just call it Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I mean that's a huge thing that they've done. And without that, we probably wouldn't be doing what we're doing now. However, there's still like a lot of people out there who have no affiliation with them. But maybe it's a fact that they own kind of like not own it, but their name is closely associated with it, so that maybe people are like, "Well, that's not real Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It didn't come from the Gracies."
Right. Well, they are. I think that family is the greatest martial arts promoters ever. Like they've done more for martial arts than I mean, I would say arguably more than Bruce Lee. Because even to this day, we're on the fence if he was an actor or a martial artist, and it's not like there is a Jeet Kune Do academy at every shopping center. I can't think of any other family that has promoted martial arts better than the Gracies, and they certainly they weren't the first to do jiu-jitsu in Brazil, but they had the money, the resources, the means. They had a huge family of sons, everything. It was the perfect storm. So they were the perfect conduit for it to expand and reach out.
No, that's a good point because I know Bruce Lee, he didn't have a lot of students really at the time. At the time of his death, I think he passed away way too soon before he could make that cultural impact. So you have like the Gracies who are still going strong, but you have Bruce Lee who started picking up steam and then passed away suddenly. What do you think would have happened if Bruce Lee was still alive today? Do you think things might be a little different, or because he did like grappling?
Yeah, yeah. We saw there's like an armbar in Enter the Dragon. Well, he trained with Gene LaBelle, who is Gene LaBelle is like I guess probably one of the toughest guys ever. He's sort of like the American equivalent of Maeda. He just took on all comers. He had the grappling and the wrestling. I think that the way that Bruce Lee like evolved Jeet Kune Do is similar. It's hard to speculate what it would be like now, but it's similar to the way that jiu-jitsu has evolved. And I think I've said before, like if you look at judo 50 years ago, or if you look at karate 50 years ago, it looks exactly the same. But if you look at jiu-jitsu 10 years ago, it's jiu-jitsu when I was a white belt looks different than jiu-jitsu does now. Like, it's constantly evolving and being refined.
I still think there's some core basics though that stay the same. I know
Oh, so yeah.
we've had conversations before on the podcast about joking between sport jiu-jitsu and you know self-defense jiu-jitsu. I feel that they can both be applicable to it. However, there's like you said, 10 years ago, jiu-jitsu was a little different. And if you look even in the United States, how many black belts were there 10 years ago? Not that
Yeah.
many, yeah. Like you can count, like North Carolina, I know there weren't that many. Because I was like, oh shit, I get to train with a brown belt? That's insane. There's like a black belt now, in this other city? Holy crap. So, like now it's like, oh, you're a purple belt, good job. Let me shake your hand. It's not bad, however, it's different. And there's a lot more evolution to it, like you said. So I know there's a lot of focus on competition. That's okay. However, I still feel like jiu-jitsu is about making sure you don't get your ass kicked if somebody tries to hurt you or your family. I will maintain that till the day that I die. Jiu-jitsu is fighting people or keeping yourself safe first, and then competition second. That's just how I feel about it.
I agree. I agree 100%. I think that once it loses the martial filter and it becomes so sport specific, it's still a beautiful art, but it's similar to to kung fu or something. It becomes so specific to scoring a point, or to like taking an advantage after a stalling opponent, that it loses the martial filter and it loses the focus of defending yourself. And I think that as jujitsu evolves, like we'll see like specialization, and I kind of like think that schools will branch, and you'll have like a division of very sport-oriented schools, and then you'll have a division of either more self-defense or more philosophic or holistic approaches. And you can see it now. Like there's our school is a little bit different. Like I said, we're a non-Gracie school. We're under Master Darcy Alira, who's a red belt from Fortaleza, and we have a very holistic approach. Now, our approach is not that different um, than the Valente brothers or the Yamasakis. Like it's not, jiu-jitsu has been around for a long time, but I think that we sort of have specialized in this sort of style where other schools have gone another way.
I think there can be a balance, though. I mean, the majority of the schools I've trained at, there's been a good balance. Like we like learning how to make sure people don't come here and stab us or take us down or whatever. But at the same time, we take those applications and we put it in tournament style, and it seems to work out really well. And that's something I try to teach my students as well, is that it's the basics.
Yeah.
Like I think there's some study that was done, like the three most common submissions done in the black belt division are like armbar, triangle choke, and like rear naked choke.
Yeah.
There's no like flying omoplata or anything like those are few and far between. But it's always the
I think
basics
those
that
are the
work.
most common in the UFC as well. I think I heard a study that said they were the most common in the UFC as well.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of the basics. They always work. I mean, I had a wrestling coach in high school, and he said, we will always do the basics. We will always start the year with basics, and we will always drill the basics from the beginning. And thankfully, that kind of stuck in my brain somewhere. So when I'm teaching, I'm like, shit, we need to make sure the basics are being taught. And it's not going to be Berimbolo night. Granted, when some of the guys get up there, are we going to go over Berimbolo? Absolutely. Because it's good for knowledge. But I still want them to be like, pass the guard, gain position, control the fight, finish the fight. That's it.
You need to be able to recognize it. It's the same as any sort of retrieval or any sort of like knowledge that you have. You don't want someone to bring something up in a conversation that you're completely ignorant to and not able to respond or react to. So it's something that they need to be aware of, and it is part of jiu-jitsu now. So it's something that we teach. We have to teach. We have 2 hour classes, and we run a sort of traditional format. I think maybe you and I spoke about this, but every night it's the ukemi, we fall, and then we drill, and then we practice the tachiwaza, we practice standing, and then we practice the newaza on the ground, then we roll, and at the end of every night we finish with a self-defense application that falls in line with the same family of techniques that we've been practicing, to try to draw that connection so people can see this holistic approach to our martial art.
Yeah, because there has to be stand. I'm very fortunate that I have Steve Rovelstad, who's a judo brown belt where I'm at. And the way the story goes, I kind of showed up. I was like, hey, I'd like to teach jiu-jitsu here. And the lady who was the manager of the facility said, sure. Turns out that she was from Maryland area. And she was at a Yamasaki Academy for a little bit. And Steve was a judo brown belt. It's her husband. He's like, yeah, I'll come too. I was like, outstanding. So it just came to be that he teaches judo, like he teaches the stand up, and I teach the ground. So he
Yeah,
teaches me how to throw people, and I teach him how to like heel hook people. So
right.
it works out well, and that's what you need. You need both of those.
Absolutely. And I think that that was what that's, we really try to preserve like approach to jujitsu that I think was sort of what Brazilian jiu-jitsu looked like early on. You had judo masters or Kodokan jiu-jitsu masters, however you want to say it, in Brazil teaching a style, and that's that's the same way that we approach it here. And it was, back then you had these members, and there was a lot. Maeda wasn't the first; he's the best known, and he is a god amongst men. But these guys were testing jiu-jitsu and judo against the Valley Tudo, against the free style of fighting, and suddenly martial arts evolved. You weren't just testing it against an Aikido guy or another judo school. You're testing it against freestyle wrestlers and people that want to punch your face in.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you got to kind of evolve that and make it so that you're not laying on your back like, well, shit, I should have just pulled guard on this guy. Now my face and my head's bouncing off the ground and I look pretty stupid in front of people. And thankfully, that's a sport environment. Regardless of what you say about MMA, it's a sport environment. So thankfully, there's a referee that stops it. There are medical staff, there's everything. But if it comes down to it, you're outside, me and my wife are walking down the road and some dude just jumps us, I guess. Hopefully that never happens, but there's going to be no ref to stop it. I'd really like to hope my wife would jump in and maybe help a little bit instead of just like looking up at her as I'm holding the guy in position. Like, can you help? Maybe a little bit, like kick him a few times. So, like it's practical, and you have to test it out. And like you said, it evolved. It had to evolve in order to make sure people kept themselves safe and beat these fighters. So, for whatever reason, that's how it came to be.
Yeah, and I love that you said, like that's your focus. And those are sort of like, I think you and I spoke, like I don't have an MMA school. And most of the time it seems nowadays that if you teach jiu-jitsu, you have MMA as well. And we have made a conscious effort to be a dojo, to be a place of the way. And I don't have an MMA background, and just out of my experience, like what you were saying about wanting to defend your family and to help other people has been very antithetical to the approach of MMA fighters who have approached me that said, hey, I want to be, the king of the cage at the local fairground and get 6 drink tickets. And, it's a totally different approach.
It is, and I mean, there's still a part of like I love MMA. I will always love it because that was kind of how I got into jiu-jitsu. Just that long weird road that somehow came to me doing Muay Thai with a jiu-jitsu guy because he, was really good at Muay Thai and learned Muay Thai. Did jiu-jitsu with him, and I was more of a Muay Thai guy than a jiu-jitsu guy. Went to a gym, and it was just more jiu-jitsu after I left there. And like I will always have that love. And I think there is a specific type that wants to fight MMA, and that's okay. But I think that there are people who want to come in, do jiu-jitsu, and just do jiu-jitsu. Or, maybe just do Muay Thai and not be a fighter. Or,
Yeah.
maybe they want to come in and do Taekwondo and not, like, do anything, I guess. But,
Yeah. Yes.
but it's interesting. And, I think we had a conversation when I stopped by your school, which, first of all, love the way the school is laid out because it does have that old school, like, you come in, the sensei's waiting for you there, and he's been training or whatever. It's very cool. I love it. It's calm. It has that good vibe to it. But I think there is a way to kind of balance it. I mean, there are guys who want to fight MMA, but you just kind of maybe need to separate them from the 9-to-5 guys who want to come in there and forget that they're, that their boss yelled at them today or that, they were in traffic for an hour and a half to go 10 miles.
Yeah, yeah, you're right, and there's certainly a balance. I like MMA. I watch UFC every now and then if it comes on early. It's not, I prefer like jiu-jitsu tournaments. I was drawn to jiu-jitsu because as a child, as long as I can remember, I was always like in love with sumo and judo, and I didn't quite have the body type for sumo. And judo wasn't available. Jiu-jitsu was the closest thing. Like, so I saw a jiu-jitsu class when I was like 10 and they were flipping each other and I'm like, all right, great. So that sort of brought me in. But the striking is certainly like ateme. It should be part of every jiu-jitsu curriculum. Like you should be able to defend it, and you should also be able to throw a punch and a kick that's realistic.
No, I agree. And you need to make sure you be able to keep the hands up. That seems to be my problem. It's probably why I'm not good at Muay Thai. But so something that you do, and I was really bummed that I wasn't able to make it up because wedding stuff, and that's okay because I told my friend I would be there. Is that you said that you like after class you like to hang out, and then I see you guys playing chess a lot too. So do you
Yeah.
find like this really cool tie between chess and jiu-jitsu?
Uh, I mean, yeah, there's certainly connections. Like as far as like it's strategic. It's not like straight down the pipe like boxing. It is strategic, and there is a plan. There's different openings. Just like whether it's a takedown or a guard pull, or there's openings just like in jiu-jitsu. Um, but for me, there is like a philosophical resonance between the two. Like there's a philosophical connection, and between like protecting the king, but there's also this balance that like another player like the rook is willing to take the place of the king if the king has weathered the storm and never moved, has never backed away. Only then will they take the place. And for me, that sort of like echoes like this lead from the front, lead by example, and that's has a philosophical meaning to me. Like as far as my teachers, the people I've trained with, they were such amazing leaders, and they've inspired me that I would take their place anytime, not like on the pedestal, but like I would do anything they ask of me.
Right, because you have that respect for them because
Have that respect.
they care. Like a good
Yeah.
instructor is going to care.
Yeah.
And that's how it all comes together. You got the good instructor, you got a guy who does films, and you got a really good class. So I know that Leon's out there, and I train with Leon a bit, and he's a good guy. So if he's out there, I know it's a good school.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Yeah, hopefully next time you're stateside, we'll get you out here for a seminar and get some training in. And
Oh, I'd love that. I was telling my wife, I was like, "Fuck, I want to go up there," and she's like, "Well, you told like it was my best friend getting married, so I had to.
yeah,
I can't just be like later, do jujitsu 4 hours away. See you later."
yeah, yeah. Well, the guys that play chess after jiu-jitsu are mostly the guys from jiu-jitsu. Like after jiu-jitsu, like we'll go and we sit and we play chess, and that camaraderie, man, is like I love it. I love that about jiu-jitsu. I love that connection, and like the way you're saying when you walk in, like you just empty your cup, and that's the way you have to be if you're gonna like absorb something like this. And I think you're in a very interesting environment, like we talked about, because of the military, like how with the rank system. That's such a fascinating like structure to me.
It is because we have there's a couple guys in my unit, like squad or platoon, and they'll come up and we'll do class. And I had to teach them from the beginning that I'm teaching to move, and they're like, "Whoa, Sergeant Austin, wait, oh, wait, no. I'm Rob here. We're both like guys who want to do jujitsu. I'm Rob. You're so and so. Don't refer to me as my rank unless we're at work." I'm like, okay. Took them like a few days to really break that, but like even the hierarchy, like the person who just took over the base or one of the commands on base is a general, and said he'd love to come train with us. So I'm Rob, and he's going to be whatever his first name is. I'm not going to call the room to attention or whatever, but it's something hopefully that he understands, and hopefully I don't mean any disrespect by it. I just want to foster this environment where everybody feels cool with asking questions or messing up or doing whatever they can. So
Yeah.
it's that weird balance.
Well, can I ask you a question? Is
Absolutely.
that okay? The tables here. So, do you find that there is a similar camaraderie within the jiu-jitsu community or within your dojo that you would say is similar to like your military, like the people that you serve with?
I would actually. I would find it very, very similar because what's weird is that in the army or in the military, you guys go through this just tough experience together of wake up early, go to PT, then you work all day, then you go home, or like basic training is a good example. It's 10 weeks of just hating life. and there's no breaks. You get to call home once a week for 10 minutes maybe. So you guys have to form this bond, and
Yeah.
you're all going through waking up at 3 a.m. because somebody messed up somewhere. And in jiu-jitsu, it's kind of the same thing. We're all on the mat trying to get better. And it's not, from an outside perspective, it's not fun. Like, what's fun about paying for a club where
Yeah.
people practice how to break arms and choke you unconscious and throw you and hit you? It's not fun. Same thing with, like, the military. Like, what's fun about basic training? Looking back, it was kind of fun, but while you're doing it, it was terrible. So it's very, like, and if I've run into people from basic, it's always, like, nothing has changed. So it's the same thing in jiu-jitsu. Like, people I beat up or I got beat up by or we trained together and just hung out. No matter what, like I'll like a good example is I was in North Carolina for the wedding. Went back to my original school and it was just kind of like, oh yeah, he's back, cool. Picked up where
Yeah.
we
Great.
were.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it was Nick Gregoriadis, and I don't know if he was quoting someone else, but I heard him say he talked about jiu-jitsu as a warlike play. And when I first heard him say that, like my initial reaction was like this sort of like this Sun Tzu kind of approach, like yeah, it's military, it's a martial art. But I think that when he says that warlike play, to me, it means something else, and it means like there's a camaraderie like that you would establish like with other warriors, and similar to what you were explaining, I think that that's a bond that's formed that's seldom in other aspects of our daily life, unless you're in the military or you're a police officer or some other role like that. Most people don't experience those types of relationships.
No, not at all. And I mean, it's something, you know, like a lot of military or former military seem to be drawn to martial arts or law enforcement, firefighters, anybody, like you said, where there's some sort of brotherhood
Yeah,
that keeps them all together. So it's the similar thing where you go to this jujitsu club and you guys beat each other up and you're like, oh, that was awesome. Let's hang out later. Like
yeah, man.
Sean, the our co-host, like me and him just beat each other up. That's kind of how we became best friends. Had a really hard roll, and we're like, dude, this is awesome. You're a cool guy. And saw each other at work, and hey, the rest is history. So that's just how it is.
That sounds like Step Brothers.
Just about.
Just became best friends.
he had
Yeah,
he had night vision goggles. I had a sword signed by Randy Jackson. It was pretty awesome.
yeah. I think that's great, man. I think that people crave that. Like you crave that sort of interaction, like that closeness, and we don't get it. It doesn't happen in so many other places, and even in other martial arts. Like certainly there's camaraderie, but it's different than like if you look at look at these high school wrestlers. Like even middle school, like it's a bond that forms. Like jujitsu is nothing new. Like Indian wrestling or Senegalese wrestling, these things are all so similar. We just put on a uniform and started grabbing the clothes, but like fighting and wrestling has been around since we've been around, since the human race has been around. And I think it's just linked in to this primal need that we have.
Yeah, it's very, like you said, well, going back to the whole tribe within a tribe, but it's still a very tribal thing. Everybody has loyalty to schools, instructors, people. It just, you share that bond. You share wanting to do, breaking arms and choking each other out, like I said, and just, it draws everybody together. But there's something I've been thinking about as well is that there has to be a person out there that doesn't, isn't quite sure. So I know when I first started doing jiu-jitsu, probably not as far back as you did, but it was tough. It was rough, and you're like either you survived or either you just survived. That was about it. There was no like, well, I'm gonna kind of halfway do jiu-jitsu. It's either you did jiu-jitsu or you quit.
Yeah, yeah. I think Roy Dean calls these people like the meat eaters, like the people that do these like combat sports. And when I first got into jiu-jitsu in the late '90s, in early 2000, even like there was still striking. There was still a lot of contact involved. And my teacher, Professor Stefan Templeton, he always had this very like because of his line of work, he had a very realistic approach to it. And like I think someone asked him one time, well, what about how do I score the point on this? And he just looked at him, and he was like, if I pull the trigger, I empty the clip. meaning, for him, it's not a sport. And it was never approached like a sport early on in my training. It was brutal. And I think that like the same guys that were doing jujitsu then are the guys that went on to be the MMA guys. It was very tough training.
Yeah, there's nothing easy about it. I mean, and the school I started at, the mentality was keep yourself safe because the guy who ran it was a former police officer. So, but he had Muay Thai fights, he had MMA guys he was training, so it was tough. And I kind of am guilty of saying, well, if I can do jujitsu, anybody can do jujitsu. And I kind of look back and said, well, I like getting punched in the face, and been injured more times than I can count. And I'm like, well, maybe it's not quite. If I can do jiu-jitsu, anybody can do jiu-jitsu. I think anybody can benefit from jiu-jitsu as long as we give them a good experience. Not, oh, the white belt's here, the new guy. Everybody break his arm. Break him in
Yeah.
real good, guys. I think
Yeah.
those days are kind of gone now.
I do too. But the beauty of the evolution of it and the specialization of it is that you can find a school if you want to just compete or if you want to have a more self-defense approach. If you want to do stand up, if you want to become a black belt and only learn two throws, then there's a school for everyone. Like there's so many expressions of jujitsu now. It's become, I think it's more accessible than ever.
It is, and there's schools everywhere too, which kind of blows my mind because Sierra Vista, where I'm from, to give you any idea, it's the smallest military base in the Army. And it's probably one of the smallest cities in the world. And there are 3 jiu-jitsu schools there.
Yeah.
Like, there are more jiu-jitsu schools than there are taekwondo schools there. It
Well,
just,
that's saying something.
yeah, it's becoming more accessible. And like you said, I think it's going to be taking over. I think we haven't even hit the peak of popularity yet, honestly.
No, I think that there's a lot of talk about jiu-jitsu becoming an Olympic sport. So that would be huge for the martial art. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence. I think that if that happens, if you look at judo now, like it's the sportive aspect of judo is not exactly the way that it was originally developed, where there was still attention to the ground fighting, to the newaza, and to the joint locking and the self-defense. Like back in the day, they beat out the police, for that. Like the Kodokan challenged the police jujitsu force, you know, and that's how real it was. And then, I think after Kano had this vision of being sort of this ambassador to the world, then it just became more and more watered down because he wanted it in the Olympics so bad.
And something that judo has for the sport aspect as opposed to jiu-jitsu is that they have just one federation that kind of governs all, where we're kind of split up. We've got, the IBJJF, the SJJF, NAGA, like all these different organizations that kind of control like ranking or,
Yeah.
competitions and stuff. We're so all over the place that I think that's like a huge problem that might hinder us if we actually go to the Olympics.
I think that sort of division is unfortunate, and you have to look at like where does this stem from? Who benefits from that? From you only thinking that there's one legitimate way. Of course, who benefits from it are the people that are pushing that brand. Um, in judo, like if you go to a judo school, like most of the time everybody's in one color gi. Like we wear one color gi here, and people don't like that. People will like intentionally or will avoid joining our school because they have to wear a white gi. Like they don't want to do that. But if you look at like a judo school, especially the schools in Japan, like because in judo it's not about me, it's about the school, you know, and it's not about like a federation or a name. Other than like a few people, like how many judo lineages can we name? I can't name that many.
Yeah. There's quite a few from what I understand.
Oh yeah, just look at a few jujitsu lineages, and most people can only name one or two of those as well.
Right. But no, I mean that's something interesting about jujitsu is that it seems to be like we said skateboarding. It's a very individual type thing. I mean, we're talking about gis. I mean, that's why I asked too before I came up there. Said, what type of gi do you guys wear? Because I've got like I don't know if you can see in the background. I've got like a Ninja Turtle gi
I
on.
see the green one. I
Yeah,
see.
so I mean, there's there's that. But I do have my traditional white gis with nothing on them and stuff like that. It just jiu-jitsu seems to be a very individual type of expression, which drew me to it as well. And coming up through a type of martial art where it was, I'm not Rob, I'm Mr. Austin. Like, what makes me better than you? Like, I was kind of done with that, I want to be approachable. I want to be Rob. I want to be the guy who does jujitsu. And, do you call Hoist Gracie Sensei Hoist or, Sensei Gracie or whatever? You call him Hoist. Or any of the other guys, like high level guys. Any black belts, I'm guilty of calling him coach or professor. However, it's not, stop the class, everybody turns, bows to the guy. I like the informality of it. I like being informal. I like hanging out, doing jiu-jitsu, and just bonding with people. And that seems to be what works best for me. So I think that's something that really drew me to it. Is like, there is focus on the school, but there's still like an individual aspect. Like, my jiu-jitsu is completely different than your jiu-jitsu as far as like my style. Not saying that the moves are different. It's just what I prefer going to would probably be different than what you prefer going to.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that's probably like a pretty reasonable hypothesis. And I would say that our styles may also differ because of body type. I do think that that is like a game developer. And I certainly understand that appeal, like the sort of laid back, like the surf culture and the skate culture is very much associated with Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Like, like there's so many famous practitioners now they're about as far away from traditional martial artists as you can get, you know? And I think that's great. I think for us, the role that we serve is we're the opposite of that. We go with tradition. And I've mentioned before with a bunch of people, I can't remember if it was Alan Watts or Ram Dass or somebody said something about like when you go with the flow of the river, you absorb all of the knowledge and everything that the river knew that's behind you, that's in the past. So you go forward with this understanding of the tradition, and that helps you like navigate, with a clarity. And that means something to me. It's certainly not for everyone. And for me, there's a comfort, there's a calm in the tradition. Now, I'm certainly approachable. If you look at like I play. We all hang out and chill and play chess or whatever. We all hang out together, and my friends in the dojo are my friends that I hang out with the most outside of the dojo.
Yeah, just the way it is, like the brotherhood we all talked
Absolutely.
about.
Absolutely.
So, James, before we wrap up the podcast today, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to? Any place we can find your work? Facebook pages? Just go crazy. The floor is yours. Do whatever you want to do.
Sure. You can find me on Facebook under James Coleman. You can find us on Facebook, Darcia Lira Jiu-Jitsu. There's multiple pages for the schools in Brazil, the schools in California, our schools on the East Coast. You can find us on the internet if you Google Darcia Lira. We have Darcia Lira Jiu-Jitsu Squarespace is the space or the page for us specifically. So we're pretty easy to find. The film I will be pushing through social media, and I would be honored. I'll certainly send it your way. And if you think it sucks, then you can just forget I ever sent it. But I have some other podcasts that are going to help me push it out once it happens. And as far as shout outs, man, I feel like I'm on like Yo MTV right now. To my teachers, Professor Damocles, Professor Stefan, and certainly my best regards to our master, Darcia Lira. And I'd like to shout out to my buddy Jason at the Intellectual Gentlemen's Club. Much like yourself, Jiu-Jitsu has helped me meet like the coolest people in network. And to Strong Arm Sports, one of our sponsors, and we'll be getting you some cool stuff here soon when the new Jiu-Jitsu line comes out.
Ooh, yeah. That was kind of under wraps, but I don't care. It's going to be out here pretty soon. And speaking of which, I actually wore that shirt. Hey, it works. First place I wore the shirt, they're like, oh, what do you do? Jiu-Jitsu, and then just went from there. It was awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
And one last little tidbit: I actually was trying to be a film major at one point, so I do appreciate the movie stuff. So trust me, I probably will not think it sucks unless it's.
Yeah, man, I can't wait to hear your critique on it. Then it was a huge endeavor. I've never filmed a choreography like a fight scene before, and I've certainly never like gone out of my way to make it look real. And it was so challenging. It was so challenging.
I look forward to seeing it. And I mean, hey, if it's as long as it's not from Justin to Kelly or whatever that movie was with the two people from American Idol, I think I'll give it a thumbs up. It'll be awesome. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Big Jiu-Jitsu Show. Don't forget, we're a member of the Pod Bros Podcast Network. Go to podbros.com. Find a podcast other than ours because you need to be listening to ours. And don't forget to go to bigjujitsu.com. Find all the stuff you want as far as podcast episodes that we've done and T-shirts. We still have T-shirts. Go buy some of those. I'm Rob the Lord Humongous, and we will catch you all next time.